Aloha, everybody. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First, we're going to ask the question, why is the government seemingly silent on all the hate crimes that are being conducted against pro-life pregnancy centers and some Christian organization? Let's chat about that. Hello, Jim Hochberg.
Yo.
you do that about every fourth show. I think you get tired of this back and forth
Hi,
banter.
Andrade.
All right. So we welcome our viewers and listeners on K-Light Radio and KESU Radio and those watching us on YouTube. And for those of us that I like to call the Jim and Eva, what are the people that follow the bands around? Groupies. Yes, we have a few groupies. I know Jim has a fan base. Wherever we go, there is one individual who's watching this, and you know who you are right now, that likes Jim.
Every show we do,
every show, they are there. And we appreciate you, okay? So we won't call you out and make any trouble. But that individual does know, because we were on the same wavelength when she sent the article, a recent post from Congresswoman Mazie Hirono, when she actually said in her comments about this is a call to arms. Now,
this being the Dobbs decision.
Well, this was because of all of the red states that are trying to do things right to make it harder to get an abortion. The blue states, nothing has changed in the blue states. In fact, recently we had one of our gubernatorial candidates that was very proud to let people know that this candidate supports a woman's rights and what they're going to do if they're elected into office. I think that it is interesting that people who are pro-life, who consider themselves pro-life, can be very, very, very on top of this issue. Like they really want to know where their candidates stand on the issue of pro-life.
And we won't name the candidate, but the candidate's first name indicates you shouldn't take the candidate seriously.
Oh, you're too funny. I'm not going to even go there, Jim Hochberg. I'm going to stay safe. But we do recommend, as we do with every election season, that do not just vote for a candidate because you're familiar with their name.
Don't wait until election day or when you're ready to turn your ballot in to finally look at it and try to pick names. Don't do that. We have to stop doing that.
Yeah, and Jim and I are going to be doing our Dog and Pony show again at One Love on October, is it the 16th? 19th. October 19th. We'll have more information as we get closer to that. So those of you listening on Oahu or watching and you're on Oahu, check out Hawaii Family Forum, because I'm going to keep you updated on when that is. And we're still trying to decide a sexy title. Jim is very hard to pick titles for. But
do whatever you want.
Anyway, if you want to see Jim and I live, that is one way you can definitely do it. But I think that to be fair to Senator Hirono, when she made the comment, there were a lot of people on her Twitter feed that said that she didn't literally mean that this is a call to arms.
Did she say she didn't literally mean?
No, she said
she meant
this
it.
is a call to arms. That was her exact comment on it. And I think that really, last week we talked about how people don't trust the government. This is another example of why people don't trust the government, because they do one thing for one group of people, but they will not do it for other. Because I am telling you right now, and I am not a mega Trump person. I'm not. But I know that it bothers
red shirt.
me. Thank you. And it's not red, it's brown. But anyway, when people make comments that everybody who voted for Trump fits into this box, right? That they should be treated in this manner.
75 million people? They can't all be the same.
No, and you even last week you quoted a study that actually talked about that, right? About this mistrust towards this whole huge group of people. But if Trump, and this is my point on this, if Trump from the pulpit, or not pulpit, but from his podium, ever said, this is a call to arms, every single congressional person on the blue aisle would be all over that he was doing an insurrection.
On January 6, 2021, from the rally that Trump held in D.C. on the Mall, he said, go peacefully to the Capitol and exercise your democratic rights. And it was turned into
insurrection,
an
Jim.
insurrection.
It's an insurrection, Jim.
So you're actually righter than you think you are, more correct than you think you are, because it did happen exactly that.
So here's my plea, okay? And Jim and I are actually going to start to get more raw when we do these shows, because Jim and I have been doing this job, or trying to get people to get involved in politics, for over 20 years. That's how passionate we are. We aren't the wilting willows that fall away because we don't get our way, because if that had been the case, we would have quit a long time ago, right? Because
Correct.
we work in this. So my plea is to the media. I don't care what your politics are. You might be a Democrat, you might be a Republican, you might be a libertarian, you may be somebody who doesn't vote. I don't want to know what your politics are when you're writing an article. I don't want to know. I want the facts. I want to be able to read an article and go back to trusting journalism, because most people do not anymore.
And my undergraduate degree is in journalism.
Yes.
Under our constitutional system up until Obama, the press was the guardrail to keep the politicians honest in D.C. and in Honolulu and in Sacramento. Because what the politicians needed was for the press to ask questions and let us know to keep them accountable. But since 2008, during the the second years, the press just totally threw away their objectivity and their mission of holding the government accountable and became cheerleaders.
And to be honest, I'm sick of it, because you and I do this for a living. So for us to read all these different articles so we can come up with the truth, the regular person doesn't have time to do that, Jim.
And a good example of when that actually happened was in the early 70s, when All the President's Men movie facts occurred with the Nixon administration. And Woodward and Bernstein were young reporters at the Washington Post, and they dogged that story, and they were getting stonewalled by the Nixon administration. They kept dogging it, and they broke it. And what happened is Nixon ended up resigning. That's the ultimate accountability of a politician. We can't even get the New York Times and the Washington Post to do an honest story on anything in the Democrats in D.C.
Okay, I want to make this clear. We try to do this every time we do a show. There might be some people that work in journalism that are very honest. And so we appreciate you if you're taking the time to write an honest story. So we don't want to paint everybody with that broad brush. But a good example of this is Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, because the way that Britain's laws are written, the monarch cannot take a position on issues. They cannot do it. They leave it to their House of Lords and their House of Commons, right? That's
be interesting to see how Charles the 2.5.
There are many people asking that same question, because he was very involved on things like the environment and stuff like that. So it was interesting.
He's not real mature.
So when I'm watching, it was interesting because I spent a lot of time, as did several of my friends, watching the entire thing. When the Queen passed, and of course my heart and thoughts go out to the people in England, because I think that she was a very beloved monarch, and I think a lot of people across the world had good relations with her. When she became queen at 21, she gave this speech about how she was going to dedicate her life to the people, that was going to be what she did. And a lot of the English commentators were saying that she lived that. So when she died, they were able to point to a woman who lived a life with honor. She was definitely a strong Christian woman. Now, I bring that up.
And I will tell you, Mazie Hirono is not that.
Okay, and so here's what I'm saying. You could be involved in politics as a journalist and not let people know what side of the aisle you're on. I mean, how hard is it to say the apple is red and it fell off the tree? I don't want to know that it was a Republican that punted the apple over the fence and a cow trampled it. And the cow choked on the apple, so the Republican killed the cow.
Well, how hard is it to say boys are boys and girls are girls?
Well, in today's world, because the definitions don't mean, and you and I did a show a long time ago about definitions, right? And how things have changed. We talked about that, how you cannot, in that.
But I want to talk about hate crimes because I have a particular opinion.
No, I know you do.
So we got to get into
So let's start. I want to start with this, because when I'm talking to people about hate crimes, Jim, the biggest question I get, and as an attorney, you'll be able to answer this. What is a hate crime exactly, and what is the punishment for a hate crime?
So a hate crime is a political word that made its way into some criminal statutes that doesn't mean what the word means.
Now, does Hawaii have hate crimes in its statutes?
I don't know. I would assume so, but I don't actually know.
Okay.
But here's the problem. If Joe hates Susan, he can act in certain ways that are not nice, that are actually mean, that are even worse than mean, like violent or whatever. But none of those actions prove hate. The way you prove hate is by the guy saying, I hate you.
Well,
because it's a thing between the ears.
In my experience, and obviously there's a lot more stories out there, but like in an instance where an individual goes on a rampage with a gun or whatever.
But they may not hate anybody. They may just be crazy.
You're right. But what I'm saying is I have heard instances where they peruse the person's social media and that person will say, you know, I hate this group of people. Or so they have shown that for whatever reason, they do have animus towards this group of people. And so that's why these people get these hate crime
That's a very slippery slope. And I would say the only way to know the motivation of the conduct of an actor is for the actor to tell you what the motivation was. Circumstantial evidence, they said something about people on this team, if it's a sports team or if it's a political team or whatever, that's circumstantial evidence. You can't determine through speculation what somebody thinks. But here's the thing.
People aren't going to admit that they hate somebody.
But that's why that word is wrong to use. So, for instance, okay, let's say Fred thinks that LGBT people are grooming kids through the school system. And Fred's not particularly balanced individually. So on a Friday night, he runs into some LGBT people celebrating their LGBT-ness, so it's clear that's who they are, and he starts screaming at him, and it becomes a fight. He may not hate any of them. He just might think that their motivation for doing what they do is bad for the society, bad for kids. But it would be called a hate crime whether he really hates them or not.
And that's
what bothers me.
And that's the point. The point is that regardless of how you feel about this, we are being told that certain things are hate crimes. And people
That's
are
true,
being
because the government has created a false definition that they can never prove, but they don't have to prove it because that's the way they set it up.
And we talked about that.
And then the other part, which is what we're going to talk about today, is it's not even-handed.
No, and it's not. And so what I'm going to be referring to is a report that was done in September 2022 from the Religious Freedom Institute, and it's called Religious Pro-Life Americans Under Attack, a threat assessment of post-Dobbs America. Now, this is their initial study on the issue. So
they've gathered circumstantial evidence.
They've gathered information.
And they did a very good job with it.
They did, and they talk about that this is actually just the beginning. So in their report on the very first page, it says the Religious Freedom Institute commissioned a former FBI counterterrorism and intelligence expert to assess the crimes and the prospects for future attacks in the wake of the Dobbs decision. We anticipate that the multi-year investigative report will be released in 2023 and updated as needed. So basically, they put together a report that we are not hearing from the media, because the media, and we know this, I don't care who's listening to this, what side of the issue you're on, if there was an attack on a Planned Parenthood clinic, it would be on the front of every newspaper. They would be talking about it.
Every abortionist that has been hurt or murdered, which should never happen, and it's happened a handful of times, it's always big news.
And it's wrong. You and I have talked about that. There should not be these kind of crimes, and I'm not going to say hate crime because I don't want to get into it with you, but these kind of crimes, because it is a crime to blow up an organization. It is a crime to throw things that could hurt somebody. It's a crime to shoot someone, right? These are already crimes.
They're
right?
already crimes.
Okay. So this report says that as of late August 2022, and again, this is just their preliminary study, perpetrators have attacked at least 63 pro-life organizations across 26 states and the District of Columbia since the Dobbs.
And if you watch not the mainstream media, you will know about all of these. But if you watch the mainstream media, you won't know about probably any, or maybe only a couple.
But what's interesting is they're saying that 28 of the 63 are religious.
Correct.
So, and we acknowledge that all the time, that there are other faith-based groups that also do great work
Muslims
in the community.
and Jewish groups.
And there are atheist people that might be doing great work in the community. So
remember when Jason Jones started? He was an atheist.
Yeah, no.
But he was very pro-life.
A lot of people, if people's hearts are in the right place.
Hi, Jason. Send money. Be a sponsor.
Actually, anybody listening that you like this show, we could really use a sponsor. This show's never going to grow if we don't get people like you listening and viewers.
I would say the Lord could grow this show.
Oh, well, let's bring down a prophecy upon those listening and watching right now. Lord Jesus, I ask you to touch their heart wherever they're at, because we could use a lot of money. No, we could use whatever the Lord asks you to
But here's the big problem.
Okay.
If a building is firebombed, which buildings have been firebombed, and if it was firebombed on the circumstantial evidence of what the business of the building was conducting, pregnancy center work, that qualifies under the government's definition of a hate crime, because pregnancy centers, I think, are almost universally Christ-based, so it would be religious hate crime. But the federal government under Merrick Garland is too busy chasing parents at school board meetings as domestic terrorists to go after the Janes, whatever their group is called, that puts their name on these fire bombings, as domestic terrorists. And that's the problem with the hate crimes thing, aside from it being hard to define. Oh, let me add this to the definition. I bet every time a domestic dispute ends in death between a husband and a wife, girlfriend and boyfriend, however you want to do the chromosomes, it's probably a hate crime. They probably were really in a spited, hateful frame of mind the moment it happened. That's not a hate crime under the law.
Okay, let's talk about emotions very, very quickly, because it's an important topic what we're talking about today. I don't know about you, but have you ever stepped on a Lego?
Oh,
okay.
That would be, for me, hatefulness.
No, that's what I mean.
hate it.
For any parent who has walked down the aisle to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and you have stepped on a Lego, I'll bet you if we could pull all of the things that have come out of Christians' mouth when they have stepped on a Lego in the middle of the night, and I've said, I hate these darn things, because they
You
hurt.
had two girls. What were you doing with Legos?
Everybody plays with Legos.
Oh.
What you talking about, Willis?
I don't know.
Anyway, everybody in the 70s going, I know what that's about. Everybody else is like, Willis? Who's Willis? Okay, anyway, the point is that in the moment of emotions, for people that have gotten divorced, they are like, I hate this person. I've heard people say, I hate my mother-in-law. I hate my father-in-law. I hate biscuits. I mean, the word hate, first of all, in the English language could mean a lot of different things.
But real hate is very closely tied to real love. That's just a fact,
and if you
psychological.
and I'm going to say this.
And I would say people that do these quote-unquote hate crimes don't even know the individual, so they can't possibly hate them.
Well, and you may disagree with me on this, but here's my thing. If somebody kills another person, and they're murderers. Right. They murder. But if we find out that they killed them because they are a certain race, or because they are a certain gender, or because they identify as a certain gender, that person should be punished to the full extent of the law.
And they would be. Murder is pretty heavily punished
and
most
so
places.
That's what I'm saying. Why do you have to carve it out as a hate crime anyway? Because a crime is a crime is a crime.
Well, and it's part of the progressive political ideology scheme to change the nation fundamentally. All of a sudden, when you start having some murders that are worse than some other murders, you're doing that divide and conquer by whatever the categories are. And we've been seeing it for decades. And it's not getting any better. It's actually getting worse.
And it's going to get worse, I think.
We have whole BLM aficionados who get very upset when you say all lives matter. But all lives really do matter.
I think that as Christians, we need to be very, very careful that the values that we are fighting and willing to die for are the Christian values that are given to us when we have that personal relationship with Jesus, because that's why we do what we do.
Correct.
And we talk about that all the time. But I think the point that we need to remind some of our congressional leaders, Jim, is that people of faith under the Constitution of the United States of America have a right to bring their faith into the public square.
Did you see the Star Advertiser the week of September 14th or maybe 19th? I don't remember, but there was a full page color ad by the separation of church and state guys. Did you see that?
I did.
We need to grab somehow a link that people can.
Okay. I actually
because
have
basically
it, yes.
what it said is we're atheists or we're. I don't think they said they might have said atheists, and we vote, and we want all of our friends to vote for no religious philosophy in the laws.
Keep religion out of the bedroom. And
Correct.
I laughed about that because do you remember how in the days when we were fighting against that group over here, that local group that hates all religion? What was it? The free separation of state and church. And he made a big point about saying because state should always come before church.
That's what
right?
they said.
Anyway,
that was my friend Mitch Kale's organization.
I know. So when we were fighting that, it was funny because I felt like what they were saying is keep your religion in your building. Right?
That's what they were saying.
Yeah. So you go ahead to your church on Sundays, but you are not allowed once you step out of the gate, right, to bring your religion to the public square. And I'm thinking, these people, they miss the whole point that a lot of hospitals and schools and things like that were started by Christians because they wanted to give back to the community. And now, it may or may not, and I'm not a theologian, and I'm definitely not an educator in this sense. So, if there's anybody listening who can
But
help
last week you said you were starting a law school.
I did not say that. I said I wanted to do a 6-week series on the Constitution, and I want Jim to show me where it says that nobody can talk about the Constitution unless they're a lawyer. That's not true.
No, you can say anything you want. Are you an American?
I'm an American.
You can do anything you want.
And I love our Constitution.
That's
and
good.
I've read our Constitution.
Would you like one?
We have Constitution. So if you want one, you can definitely have one. But so going back to this rhetoric that's out there, that if you are a person of faith, if you work in a pregnancy resource center, if you don't count. And it's totally okay. Do you know that?
And if you're a MAGA Republican, which I think was 75 million people, you're a danger to society. We talked about that last week.
We did. So one of the case studies, though, that's in here, right, is that on June 7th, 2022, arsonists firebombed and vandalized Compass Care Pregnancy Services Medical Center in Buffalo, New York. Okay, they go on.
Go Bills.
They go on to say that, okay, so some churches stepped in and helped them be able to do their ministry while they were rebuilding, right? In the meantime,
in secret.
In the meantime, the organization now is facing a probe, and that this is somebody I know is moving to New York, and I'm laughing because I'm like, go ahead and move to a state
they've
that does
tried to pass these bills here, so talk about it.
No, anyway, it says, so the organization is facing a probe from the New York State Commissioner of Health. The basis of this commissioner's probe and related public report is a state law enacted on June 13, 2022, only 6 days after the firebombing. The law targets any pregnancy center that provides so-called limited services, meaning that it, quote, fails to provide or refer for the full range of comprehensive reproductive and sexual health care services reimbursed under the state's Medicaid program, including, but not limited to, abortion care. Now, mind you.
So what that actually means in a short sentence is, in New York, if you are a Christian pregnancy center and you don't want to refer for abortion, the government will shut you down because you don't refer for abortion.
And mind you, this Compass Care had been doing business a long time in New York, providing care to 2 people.
The mom and
the baby.
Yeah.
And just because there's a group of people out there that do not like that the second human being has been named and given human status, that means we shut you down.
Well, it's a zero-sum game for the pro-aborts there. They're saying any child that gets treated as a human before being born is contra supportive. It doesn't support our mission, which is to allow moms to kill their babies before they're born. But it's really not a zero-sum game. It really isn't, but I think that's the way they look at it.
Well, and this is what we're up against. And I want our listeners and viewers to understand this, that when Jim and I go down to the Capitol and we're testifying on these moral issues, it's normally us and a few people that care about the issue, and maybe a couple pastors, maybe a couple churches, maybe in some cases people that are doing that ministry in the community. The other side, no matter what the issue is, they've got the lobbyists from Planned Parenthood. They've got the lobbyists from Compassionate Choices. They've got the ACLU. These guys come and they're able to bring hundreds and hundreds of people to raise their voice at the Capitol. And the Christian voice is being silenced, and now it's being threatened. And so people, if I was getting picked on, Jim, by a bully every day I went to school, and every day I went to school, the bully wanted to take my lunch money or my lunch, I'd be afraid to start going to school. And I think that that's what's happening with Christians and their involvement in the political process. Some of them, not everyone, but there are some that are tired of I have pastors that have told me that they are tired of getting beat up.
Sure. And you know, this whole thing about the Republicans being domestic terrorists that Biden's putting out there, and the Department of Justice throwing these 30, whatever they were, subpoenas at Trump supporters so that it's big time news, guns drawn at the door at 6 a.m. and arresting people in the airport where it's visible and the news is there and all that stuff. Part of the motivation for that, or at least maybe not the motivation, but part of the result of that is to get people not to want to be claiming to be Republican MAGA supporters, even though 75 million Americans voted for that.
Yep. Yeah. So in these last few minutes, what we want to encourage you to do is whenever you're raising your voice on an issue, of course, we want you to speak to the issue itself. So if you're, say, sending in a letter to your representative about the issue of abortion, what you want to do is stick to the importance of what the issue is. Throwing scripture in there, it is for us Christians that is important. But what we tell people is don't send them a 5-page letter about what the Bible says about abortion, because you're not going to reach them. It's like casting your pearls before swine. I am not calling legislators swine, so I don't want to get any nasty emails. Jim's nodding his head. But what we are saying is that speak to the issue first with what you know about it.
Well, it depends on what your story is. If you happen to be somebody whose mother chose not to get an abortion at a time where she was being urged to or she was contemplating it, then you know what? You actually have a pretty good platform to say, I'm really glad I wasn't aborted. And I've, in the meantime, learned that God knew me in my mother's womb. That's
Absolutely.
scripture.
And Paul says that we count it as a blessing to be attacked for Jesus. I mean,
Right.
That's the EVA translation of that scripture. But we know that we do politics here in the state of Hawaii. So we are always going to get attacked. We know that going into it. And we know that you know that going into that. So as we end the show today, we want to encourage you to maintain Christ in all that you do. Speak up, raise your voice, build relationship.
Come to One Love on October 19th at 6:30.
Yes, and like
PM.
this video, share, subscribe, give a donation to K-Light Radio and KESU Radio because they keep good messages like this on the air. And if you want to partner with us, send me an email at info@hawaiifamilyforum.org. And stay tuned because next week we've got an exciting show for you. Mahalo, everybody.
Love thy neighbor.